Our next paper giver is Boyd Davis from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She has 3 co-authors on her paper, Dena Shenk, Linda Moore, both of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and Ruth Greene, who is at Johnson C. Smith University. Her paper, or their paper, is entitled Stylization, Aging, and Cultural Competence, or Why Healthcare in the South Needs Linguistics.
In this, I'm drawing on corpus-based examples of how cognitively impaired people retain and present themes, routines, and other features of narrative style within a context of census-driven projections for aging, cognitive impairment, and healthcare workers needed across the South for the next half-century, in order to argue that current notions of cultural competence do not go far enough in assisting caregivers, providers, patients, or clients, and to submit that patient and provider curricula currently on the books be more strongly infused with cultural and linguistic perspectives. In other words, not only do we have legal and racial and linguistic profiling to pay attention to, we're getting older and we better watch that too. When we tell our life stories, we selectively recall. We choose how to manipulate storytelling, says Johnstone, and she's right. An autobiographical narrative, we're author, director, and lead player. When we construct our life history narratives, we draw on memories to construct stories about ourselves, and we do this within the norms and cultural contexts that have shaped our lives. Even in later stages of dementia, the individual can retain a sense of self that is presented in the context of key cultural values, manifest in preserved routines and formula, and recurrent themes. The person suffering cognitive losses, however, needs assistance or collaboration in retaining or communicating this sense of self. And I'm waffling retaining or communicating because we know there's difficulty communicating. We believe up until the very last stages there's a retention of a sense of self, but it's really very hard to prove. I'm going to begin by comparing themes and life stories by 2 Appalachian oldest old Anglo women. Glory is cognitively impaired, Ida isn't. They each present facets of identity created around key values shaped by rural, agrarian, working class American society. Each presents what Steve Sabat calls self-3, the socially presented persona. And here's Sabat's schema for selfhood, personal identity, mental, physical attributes, and the socially presented self. Here we require the cooperation of at least one other person, generally a listener. With someone cognitively impaired, active listening moves into collaboration. From Anna's life story, you recall she's not impaired. Here's an example of the kinds of themes she would hit in her stories. These are just clips. We used to husk 40 acres of corn. We got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We milked cows. We worked very hard. Story after story that she tells refers to her pride in her hard work throughout her life. Glory's longest story is interactively and collaboratively constructed. I just lived in a regular farm home. I had a big old cotton bag tied around me, picking 100 pounds of cotton. I decided one day I'd pick 100 pounds. Guess how much? 103. I went over. But I am having to collaborate with her in order to keep moving the story along. But though demented, though seriously cognitively impaired, she still echoes similar themes. This is not a surprise to any of us who have ever talked to our older relatives. CEP and EW are 2 oldest old, that is, they're past their mid-80s, African-American men in Charlotte. CEP is not cognitively impaired, EW is. Here I'm simply selecting a particular stylistic trait. They both double voice in the sense of gates, he also hastens, and use incremental repetition. CEP moves fluidly across space and time in his reminiscences. EW, though cognitively impaired, retains remnants and formula from past performances. This would not surprise us. CEP's different places index events that are metonymic. If you saw what David Herman was talking about, place and space become time, and those index different times in his life, different sets of economic constraints, different obstacles that were caused in his life by racism that affect him personally, and simultaneously affecting other African American men and women. He constructs social persona across each place or time inviting the listener to align with him and thereby co-construct the story by personal and cultural affiliation with the events he talks about. In these particular clips, I'm showing double negatives. These are also on your handout, where he's using double negatives, not because he uses it in the rest of his speech, but because he's slipping in and out, inviting his listener to align with him and collaborate culturally with his speaking about what lies beneath the surface. His 5 hours of tape go back and forth as he talks about the history of racism in this country or the life story of CEP. EW's less obvious double voicing is used for both relational and transactional goals. He uses a formula back in them days within the genre of reminiscence. In co-constructed conversation, whenever Ruth pauses, he alters his formula. This helps him present a social persona from a former time as a young man, and later as an evaluation of his life, because he moves between the here and now and the there and then. The repetition of the formula is designed to cue the listener to align with him and co-construct the story. You went to Charlotte schools. I remember back in them days when I started to school, it was back in them days, you could look at it like this. We didn't have any plumbing back in them days. Tell about the kinds of jobs you had back in them days. What were you doing then? I did a lot of extra work back in them days. Several minutes later, he reveals he had become a barber, and finally Ruth asks, did you have any questions for me? For you? Yeah, I was working hard back in them days. He's still there. And so are we. In the next 50 years, expect greater diversity, slower growth. This chart is from the Administration on Aging. The red line shows the growth over 65 towards 2050. The blue line is the growth in the number of the oldest old. If you go to the government chart book, you can see the projected distribution of the population age 65 and older. Here it's by race and Hispanic origin. You can see the country changing totally. Here's a shot just of North Carolina. Look at the red. Those are counties in which nearly 25% of the population in 1999 is 60 and older. What's the projection? 2020? Need anything else about aging? Alzheimer's disease is a major concomitant to the process of aging. Here is the disease hospitalization and death rates by 100,000 persons by age for ages 50 and older in 1999 and 2001. I really hope we all live to be 85, and I really hope that at least half of us know it. Here is my chart provided from Neurological Archives. We anticipate 13+ million in 2050 using the 2000 census. What do these figures have to do with the South and with language? Well, number one, healthcare support occupations. This is going to be the growth just in the next 10 years. And I want to call your attention to the fact the red lines are pretty. They're going up very big. But the patients are going to be one ethnicity and have one set of linguistic repertoire, and the workers are going to be another. They already are. Here are the changes in the minority workforce just in North Carolina, just in 2001. This is the workforce demographic trends. Native American, Hispanic, Asian, Black, and other have all increased in terms of healthcare workers. Salaries haven't increased, but we've been able to bring people in. And I want to throw one more thing into the mix, and that is home languages across the South. We face an increasing diversity of an aging workforce and underpaid workers.